I know most of you are members of the Historical Society. If you are not a member, there are membership forms on your table, and we encourage you to consider being a member. As PBS says, it's members like you, and it really is. It's the difference, you know, for us as a nonprofit, it's your memberships that make a difference and allow us to continue to have programs like this. If you're not ready to become a member, that's okay. Please consider making a donation to our donation jar. These programs are free, and we love doing that for you as a benefit and as part of our mission, but we do need money. Just the reality of life. Everybody needs money. Can't live without it. So today's speaker, David Leroy, did I get that?
Good.
Was born in the Cortland Memorial Hospital in 1940 and attended the campus school at what is now SUNY Cortland. He graduated from Cortland High School in 1958 and attended Clarkson and Cornell, obtaining degrees in engineering. His career was with Majeski and Masters, consulting engineers in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Mr. Leroy worked on the design of a large number of bridges, including the I-84 crossing of the Hudson at Newburgh and the Maycomb Dam Bridge in New York City. Since moving to Pennsylvania, he has returned to the Adirondacks frequently to canoe, hike, and cross-country ski. He is proud to be Adirondack 46er number 1825. He has biked across both New York State and Massachusetts. In 1976, Mr. Leroy took his family on a bicentennial trip across the country and discovered a milestone along the way. This started his quest to find as many historic milestones as he could. You're on.
Okay. Thank you. Curious, anybody else here graduate from Cortland High School? Or almost graduate? just butt aids, huh?
I guess so.
Okay. A lot of people here grow up in Cortland? A lot of people didn't. Okay, I won't talk about Tom the Fruit Man then, or Russell's paper shell pecans, which some of us remember, or the varsity. But anyway, my dad ran the radio and TV repair shop, which was on Orchard Street and then on South Main Street. If you ever got your
Donnie says she was a teacher in prep school.
No.
Who was?
That's all right. I was in the campus school, but I do remember your father.
Okay.
He was a wonderful repairman.
He sure was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to talk about milestones, and this is a typical milestone. Actually, it's been dug up and built into a wall, but it shows what a milestone looks like before it was planted. Half of it would have been underground when it was originally placed. And this is typical in that it's kind of cryptic. This is on the turnpike between Lancaster and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This 55, that means 55 miles to Philadelphia. So its value is, you know, you didn't get lost because you're on the road to Philadelphia. If you start in Philly, you know how far you've gone, and if you're going to Philadelphia, you got 55 miles to go.
Where'd you say it was, sir?
This is between Harrisburg and Philly. It would be on present Route 30. There's a bunch of them on that, as you'll see later. You kind of have to know that Lancaster's at the other end, but you probably would if you were out there traveling in those days, and they didn't waste a lot of letters when they built these things. Well, now, I thought milestones were kind of new, but they're not. They go back to the days of the Roman Empire. Remember, you've heard about the Roman roads, how they used them to keep track of the people under their power. This is what's left of the golden milestone. If my Latin is correct, I think this is AU, which is, isn't that the chemical term for gold?
Yes.
Anyway, there are still some of the Roman milestones in existence, a lot of them in England. This is an example of one. I'm going to try and read that to you. Now, milestones were used on the Boston Post Road, Albany Post Road, while we were still a British colony. Benjamin Franklin was the King's Postmaster General. He was involved in placing milestones along the roads. Later, when money was needed to build roads, using the concept of turnpikes was borrowed from England. Shares of stock were sold, proceeds used to build improved roads. Tolls were collected to pay interest to the stockholders and maintain the roads. Most of the old milestones that are remaining are on the old post roads and turnpikes. This is a section of road, what it doesn't say is, yes, they had trouble selling the stock. There were other more lucrative ways to invest money in those days. And so a lot of the turnpikes that were authorized never got anywhere because they didn't sell any stock. But for this one, the state of Maryland said to the banks who needed their charter renewed, we'll renew your charter if you buy stock in the turnpike. And it worked. So that's why they call it the Bank Road down in Maryland. But a lot of the turnpikes only got started because local municipalities bought stock in the turnpike because the turnpike would benefit them business-wise. Now the neat thing is, a lot of the old milestones have survived. They have endured 200 years and they're still out there along our roads. If they could talk, they could tell you about British soldiers, George Washington, Paul Revere, Ben Franklin passing by, because this is the roads they used to travel around. And droves of pigs and cattle who were delivering themselves to market. They would remember men on horseback, stagecoaches, and covered wagons. Later on, bicycles, and finally automobiles. And those that have survived remember close calls with snowplows and vehicles that ran off the road.
Can you interpret that picture?
Yes. I was going to mention, please, with short questions, please interrupt me. It'll be more fun. This is on the turnpike between Lancaster and the Susquehanna River, called the Lancaster and Susquehanna Turnpike. 71 miles to Philadelphia, 8 to Lancaster. Those are both to the east, and 2 miles to Columbia, which is to the west and on the shores of the Susquehanna River. It's one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites.
The very first one you showed was in the wall. Was that on private property or was that on state highway? You don't know. You don't remember.
Well, it gets into how much right-of-way the government owns along the roads. It's kind of a legal thing. So I can't help you.
A private person wouldn't want to move one of those stones to their stone wall in front of their house.
Well, I think what happened, and there's a number of them like that, my guess is somebody wanted to build a stone wall, and they said, Chuck, your milestone's in the way. So I'll build it into the wall, saves me a couple of stones, and I preserve the milestone, and everybody's going to be happy. That's all I know. Now, the other thing that they've survived is road widenings, road relocations, and people who thought a milestone would make a great doorstep. So how did I get into looking for milestones? Well, 50-odd years ago I saw one, and then later, in 1976, as she mentioned, I was on a trip and saw this one in Wheeling.
Oh, cool.
It's kind of an old picture, but it's the best I have. It's from 1976. We were out there a year ago and found that this milestone has been moved, but it's intact and it's still surviving.
Triadelphia?
That's a town in western Pennsylvania.
Oh.
That's a milestone on the National Road, first federally funded highway. Okay, most milestones are made of stone, like this one. This one has 3 sides. I like it because you can see it coming down the road. But here's an example of a wooden one. Of course, that's a replica. Wood doesn't last 200 years. This one is obviously made of concrete. You can see the form right up there. And finally, this one is made of cast iron. Now, I talked about deciphering them. This one's on what we call the Carlisle Pike today, but it's Route 11 between Harrisburg and Carlisle, Pennsylvania, down here where I live. It's unusual in that it has writing on 3 sides. This means 10 miles to Harrisburg. On the other side is 8 miles to Carlisle. And on the front, 100 miles to Philadelphia. They have to use PH to distinguish Philadelphia from Pittsburgh. Notice here that a local chapter of the DAR has preserved that. And they have, local chapters of the DAR have restored a lot of old milestones. I understand that's part of their purpose, but I haven't talked to them. Now this one's a little harder to decipher, but that's a B. Then you can see 62, and then an M, 62. I think that's Baltimore, 62 miles. This is a G for Gettysburg, 15 miles, and I think there was an M there. That's on an old Route 15 down near Cashtown. Old Route 30 near Cashtown, Pennsylvania. Now, I get a kick out of this one. Some of them have arrows, which is nice, otherwise you don't know which way those towns are. I like the one you asked me to interpret it. You gotta kind of know where you're going. But when you're going slow, you probably keep good track of it. So there's an arrow here, and that's telling you that these two towns are in that direction. But the guy who carved it thought that the word "to" ought to be written in the same direction as the arrow. So he wrote it from right to left. The other thing I get a kick out of is you can't erase when you're putting the letters on the milestone. This was supposed to be 7. I don't know what he started with, but he's got it backwards 7, and that's what we're living with.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about finding and photographing milestones. I did find a little book that was helpful because it listed the history of the old turnpikes. And my wife wants me to make sure you understand that these turnpikes were 200 years ago, not to be confused with today's turnpikes, the first one of which was started in 1940, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, same year I was born. When I'm talking about turnpikes, I'm always talking about the old ones. But I will mention, the first turnpike in the country was the one from Lancaster to Philly. It's in Pennsylvania. The first modern turnpike was the Pennsylvania Turnpike, also in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvanians can be proud of that. Now let's see. I want to talk about recording the messages on milestones. Photographs are great, and usually somebody's painted the letters. Usually not in blue or in red. Usually it's in black and white. This is that one with the backwards 2 again. I put some snow on it to help bring out the letters. And here's one down near, it's on the Catskill Turnpike, east of Binghamton. I didn't realize that this was a milestone, except it was a mile away from another milestone. I said, maybe that's a milestone. I got out of the car and looked, yeah, you can see some writing on it. This was years ago. A few weeks ago I went back, checked on it, and sprayed it with shaving cream to bring out the letters. You can see how well it worked. The lady who owns the land where it's located, and I guess she owns the milestone too, has been taking good care of it. I washed all the shaving cream off because I didn't want to hurt the stone, and I sent her a free copy of my book for her reference. Now, here's another example. One of the best ways, without hurting the milestone, to read it is to get the sun to shine in for an angle to give you deep shadows. You can do that with smoke and mirrors too, but it's nice if you're just there at the time of day when it's right. So this has some white paint, but also the shadows help a lot to be able to read it. Now I brought along, this is a great map. I sent to Albany to get it. It's 1808, and it shows a lot of the turnpikes in New York State. In fact, most of the old turnpikes, like somebody said, the old Indian trails, have become modern roads, modern high-volume traffic roads. A couple of exceptions are a short section of the Albany Post Road between New York City and Albany. This is still a back road. It has milestones on it. That one's kind of hidden. It's poison ivy, so I left it alone. Another one in this section, these people getting credit for building this enclosure to protect it, but I think they were a little late because it's pretty hard to read. Well, back in the 18th century, all we had was trails, and they got pretty muddy whenever it was wet. And so we needed good roads, all-weather roads. What we needed was macadam, a bunch of gravel out there to keep the mud from making the road impassable. This is a good section, cross-section of a macadam road in those days. The top layer is stones which would pass through a 3-inch ring. The bottom layer is stones that would pass through a 7-inch ring. Now, I don't think they passed every stone through the ring. But I do think, from what I understand, they broke a lot of the stones with a sledgehammer. They didn't have the gravel crushers that we're familiar with. So it was a lot of work, and it cost a lot of money. And that's when they started using the turnpike concept that they borrowed from England, where they sold shares of stock and used the money to build the roads and the proceeds to pay dividends. I guess I mentioned the first turnpike. Oh, turnpikes. The name turnpike comes from the pike that went across the road. These are the supports for the pike. They've obviously been moved back now to accommodate this modern road. But the pike was a long pole that was across the road until you paid your toll. That's just like it is today on the thruway. There's a board that goes across the road until you pay your toll, unless you have Easy Pass. This is a toll house in the same area. Okay, the first turnpike in the country is the one from Lancaster to Philly I keep mentioning. It was opened in 1794. Now that's just 5 years after our Constitution was ratified. Philly was our second most populous city, and Lancaster was our largest inland city. So this was a road between two important towns. It was 62 miles long. Down in Lancaster today, I hope it's still there today, is the first or last milestone, depending on how you look at it. It's in front of the Lancaster County Prison. You'd be surprised how many people from Lancaster had no idea that it was there. Then a mile away is built into the parapet of this bridge over the Conestoga River is the next milestone. The milestone is actually down here, 61 miles to Philly, 1 to Lancaster. And this says, this tablet taken from bridge formerly on this site. Now, look closely. This and this are the same as in the last picture. They were carefully preserved and moved onto the current bridge over the Conestoga River. So that's the first two milestones starting from Lancaster. I have pictures of several others along the way. This guy built a birdhouse on top of a fire plug. Anyway, you're supposed to be looking at the milestone. Here's the one I showed before. It's got a historical market next to it. This one has been restored. When I first found it, it was covered with paint. Somebody used it to hold up a sign advertising a yard sale. Okay, I need to mention that this turnpike from Philly to Lancaster was very popular, and it began a frenzy of turnpike construction in the Northeast, and pretty soon the whole Northeast was crisscrossed with turnpikes. There were a total in New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, there were a total of 7,000 miles of turnpike at the peak. Okay, this is a turnpike between Middletown and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and what amazes me is, they've been out there 200 years, how many of these have survived? I got a row of them. That's 3 miles to Lancaster, 4, 5, 6, 7, keep going, 8, 9, 10, this one's going now. We skip to 13, 15, now this is 17. Somebody thought that would look better painted red. And this one I love. I'm lucky to have found it because it's in town, and I did this from a car. Somebody built their picket fence around it in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. And this is the last one of the group. So these are there because somebody, I don't think it's an organization, but people along the way have made it their business to take good care of these milestones. This one, of course, has got black and white paint on it, but makes it a lot easier to read. So that was my place. What's it? Show me a picture. Jay. Oh. Oh. Okay. Yes. Before long, the federal government got in the game. There was a need for a good road to connect the east with the west, and in particular, the old Cumberland Road needed some work. It went from Cumberland, Maryland, to Wheeling, West Virginia. There was a big fuss about whether you should spend federal money on a road that only benefited one particular locality of the country, but they did want to tie the country together, and they went ahead and built the road. So This is a typical milestone on the Cumberland to Wheeling part of the National Road. It looks like a stone, except you've already seen that they're cast iron, and the way they built them was cast iron, and they slid them down over a wooden post. But it did help it to last a long time to be built of cast iron. Now, west of Wheeling, that section was built a little later. This is one of the great toll houses that survived. It's in a sleepy little town because they relocated the highway and all the traffic is half a mile away. West of Wheeling, they used this style of mile marker, and I kind of like it because it's got a stylish shape and it gives a distance to 5 towns. Now you have to know what N is. I don't happen to know, or I. Oh, that's 14, yeah. A lot of them have survived. There's a museum out there that has a bunch of them underground, and there are a lot of replicas out there too, so it's kind of confusing. Now, the National Road was built of macadam, but at some point, this section was built of brick, and it's still preserved out there. Some of you old timers might remember Monroe Heights.
Yep.
It was built of brick too, and I lived on Monroe Heights, and cars went down the road, brrr, over the bricks.
Where was that?
Where was that?
Indiana or Illinois?
Yeah.
Oh.
West of Wheeling somewhere. There's signs there, and this is just a mile where you go off on the back road to check this out. Somebody has made it their point to take care of it to some extent, or it wouldn't have been preserved that well. Okay. Now, as they taught us at Cortland High School, New York State was blessed with the windfall of having a break in the mountains. The Appalachian Mountains have a break where the Mohawk Valley goes through, and that made a difference. And that's where the Route 5, Route 20, Erie Canal, and the New York Central go across the state. And so the easy way to go west was to go north from New York City to Albany. I only show the turnpikes that I have milestones on, but from Albany you would go west out the Mohawk Valley to get access to the western part of the country. The roads up here that you would take west are the Cherry Valley and the Seneca Turnpikes. There were others too. Now, paragraph, there we go. Now, I don't have milestones for the Cherry Valley and Seneca Turnpikes. Of course, they still have the same name, so you can find them. But there are milestones, and I've shown some already, along the Albany Post Road. This one looks like an original because it's kind of beat up, preserved by the DAR, the local chapter of the DAR again. This is on that section where it's still an old back road. Now this one's out on Route 9. That's not a 9 for Route 9. That means so many 89 miles to New York. This is further up. And there's 3 of them that I found that had this interesting stylized way of writing New York. We're now closer to Albany. Now, there was another way to go west and take a shortcut and not go to Albany. And one of the ways was to use what we call the Catskill Turnpike. It started at Catskill on the Hudson River and went west to Unadilla. You know where Unadilla is?
Yeah.
Great, okay. And this is another road that has not turned into a modern superhighway. It's just an old 2-lane road. And I like to think it's not much different than it was 200 years ago. The people along there have done a lot to preserve their milestone. Look at this fancy masonry on this milestone. That one is not encased. Probably the owner takes good care of it though. The proper name for this turnpike was the Susquehanna Turnpike, and it eventually was extended to Bath, New York. Now, as you probably know, I was reading about it in this orange book here I bought yesterday that you guys are selling. there was a turnpike that came close to Cortland. There were 5 turnpikes called 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Great Western Turnpike roads in the eastern part of the state. And the 4th Great Western Turnpike road started in Homer. Here it is it's called Albany Street. You know where Albany Street is in Homer? You live there.
Going to Ryder. I'm looking at
Oh,
a
that's
picture
the
of
one, yeah.
Ryder.
I didn't take a picture of Homer. I thought you knew where that was. So I'm up in DeRuyter, and it's Albany Street. There's also Utica Street. There's another street called Cortland Street, so seems like they were thinking about going somewhere. But you could get to Albany. I mean, Albany's a long way for having a sign in Homer. So you could get to Albany by taking a series of these Great Western Turnpike roads. Let's talk about, well, I want to mention there were 4,000 miles of turnpike built in New York. Ultimately, many show on the map that I have back there. P, okay. There's an outfit in western Pennsylvania that is building out of fiberglass replacement mile markers to replace the cast iron ones that break. Cast iron is kind of brittle, and when it gets hit, it just breaks in two, not like steel, which is bad. And so this is a good example. This shows the new fiberglass milestone and the broken old cast iron one that it's replacing. Now, some places, they just use a replacement milestone. Now, that's modern and it's pretty and so on, but it's not the same style as, these are its neighbors along the road. This is what the old ones look like. They were done by people who weren't into cartography, or what do you call it?
Monument, they weren't monument.
No, whatever. And down in Maryland, somebody has put little concrete slabs with the message that was on the milestone and just worn away next to them. So that's kind of neat. Okay, we have milestones today. They're on the interstate system. Like the system in the railroads used and the Romans used, they give the distance to a common point. In the interstate system, it's usually the west end of the state or the southern end of the state where the mileage starts. And the interchanges, a lot of them now, are numbered to match the nearest mile marker. Now, the railroads were better at using this system. The milestones on the railroads typically gave the distance to the headquarters of the railroad, measured along the track. On spur lines, like this one, they give the distance to the intersection with the main line. This is down on the Skyline Drive. Mile markers are used to identify points along the way. And Alaska Highway, mile markers are used extensively in describing places along the way. Not only the Alaska Highway, all the roads up there have mile markers. But there's something wrong with this picture. That's a historic mile marker. Why does it say historic? So it's rusty and so on, and it looks old, but I think it's a replacement. Now, the government wanted to have all the miles of federal highway in the United States measured from this point right here, the 0 milestone, right in front of the White House. I'm blocking it out. A lot of people don't know it's there. It never caught on. I'm told that it's used within the District of Columbia itself. But it was interesting to visit it.
Is it still there?
Yeah, it was there. If I looked that much younger,
Did you take it away with you?
yeah. Well, I've always been intrigued by the fact that we got away with getting around on foot with a little help of horses and mules and so on from the dawn of civilization until the 1800s, about the time we started building turnpikes. Then 30 years after the first turnpike was opened, we built the Erie Canal. Now, we still use horses and mules to propel the boats on that. But then 5 years later, the Baltimore and Ohio opened the first railroad in this country. When it first started, it was pulled by horses too. But very shortly, a locomotive arrived, and things have never been the same since. When this happened, turnpikes and the other roads were used mostly for short hauls or to get to the train station. An exception occurred about 1850. This was as the use of turnpikes was diminishing, when a fad started building plank roads. Plank road is just a wooden deck. So you ride on a nice smooth wooden deck instead of a bumpy road. And I just found this picture the other day. This is between Homer and York. It says Plank Road. That's named for the Planks, not the Plank family that lives in this area.
That's the 1855 map.
Yeah, it was the 1850s when this happened. Doesn't show on that map back there. But the plank roads were built right on the ground. In fact, the longitudinal members were on the ground and they put dirt between them, so they were damp all the time. And the planks on the top suffered from horseshoes and so on. The people who financed them needed them to last for 10 years in order to recoup their investment. Well, the planks didn't last that long. And so the plank road era lasted no longer than the planks themselves. What did survive, and you've probably seen them, this is over east of here, roads named Plank Road. I've seen them all over the place. Probably an old plank road was there, and that's how it got its name, and the name stuck.
You know what county that's in, that plank roadside?
Is it near Remsen, probably?
Oh, Remsen.
North of Utica.
Okay.
But you've got one of these magic boxes. You can look up Plank Road and I know where they all are.
Route 11
It's
was
not
ours.
fun anymore.
Route 11 through Tully was ours.
Yeah, and there was one from Syracuse up to Central Square. So I think it went all the way through. It was supposed to be a,
It's Brewerton Road now.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm almost done. Bear with me now. I want to talk about the automobile. It was invented around and started being used around 1900. And the idea of crossing the whole country in an automobile was really interesting to a lot of people. One of the first to drive across the country in an automobile, believe it or not, was Emily Post, and she did it properly. Leaders in the manufacture of cars thought it would be neat to have a transcontinental road paved in concrete. So they scraped up enough money to build demonstration roads called seedling miles. Here's one that has survived from the 20s in Nebraska. The route they came up with was called the Lincoln Highway. It used mostly US 30. And in 1927, the Boy Scouts planted these Lincoln Highway markers. There's one in western Pennsylvania. And they didn't have mile markers on them, but they did help you to stay on the highway. This told you you've got to turn left in a short ways. Some of them just tell you to go straight. And this is the medallion that was put on each one of the Lincoln Highway markers. There's a lot of them out there. The Lincoln Highway went all the way to San Francisco, and there were markers here and there all along the way. Now this is a replica, which makes it look hopefully like the Lincoln Highway markers looked when they were originally placed with nice bright paint. This is near Donner Pass in California, and I'm a nut about this stuff. I talked my wife into bushwhacking over to see where the old highway went in Donner Pass, and it started over here, came up through here, went under the Central Pacific Railroad, which has now been put in a tunnel, and then on up and out of sight. So that's where what the Lincoln Highway was like out there. Now, I want to talk about preserving milestones. You've seen all those masonry houses. Some people thought it'd be nice to put them in a doghouse. There's a couple of them out on the Susquehanna Turnpike that are in doghouses. The DAR built this little pipe fence around. They built it, actually there's a whole string of them down near like Shannon State Park in Pennsylvania that have these big concrete slabs and pipe railings. This one, Nancy just added this. This one is preserved because it sits inside a fireplace in the Ship Tavern between Lancaster and Philadelphia. So as I say, it's protected from everybody except the patrons of the tavern.
Did you say the Ship Tavern?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that uncarefully.
Yeah.
This one has been preserved by the DAR, and they got so excited about giving credit to themselves that they put their plaque over the third line of the text.
Yeah, they do it, yes, they do it to gravestones too.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, oh, here's another one that's hiding in plain sight. That protects it too in a way. The milestone is here, and I wouldn't have found it except I found it online somehow. That's what it looks like up close. Not a lot of people would know to bother that one or vandalize it. That's down in northern Maryland. In Pennsylvania, when they do road work which disturbs milestones, the contractors are required to take good care of them and replace them. This is a milestone on Route 61 in Pennsylvania, 23 miles to Reading, that has been carefully preserved by the contractor, and he'll make sure it's there when it's finished. I've seen places where they've taken them out and put them back. Another way to preserve a milestone, this is a National Road milestone, that's been moved to a rest area on the interstate. I think it should be safe there. But it's mostly people who have a milestone in their front yard and think it's important and make sure it's preserved. Those are the people who should be thanked, because most of the milestones fall in that category. Well, late in my research for milestones, I revisited each one. I wanted to record its longitude and latitude so folks could use the information, like to find them or to know where they were, or maybe to treat a milestone as a geocache. But I found that some of the milestones had disappeared. This is an example of one. It's gone. Well, I say it's gone. Actually, when I got there, I looked all around for the top half of that thing, and it occurred to me, maybe it got launched when it was hit by traffic moving this way. So way back here at the bottom of this embankment, I found the top half. It's in my living room. I don't know what to do with it. I can try to glue it back on. I'm going to get some help from the DAR maybe. The other problem is, this is the new road. The original highway is about a quarter of a mile off in this direction. So the question is, do you put it back here anyway? Or do you put it on where it belongs, on the old original road? Well, when they're gone, not all of them are found like I did that one. Really, a part of our history is gone. And so I said, well, somebody must be keeping track of these milestones. And I looked and found that nobody did. So I became a self-appointed milestone historian. And wherever I went, I looked for milestones. I found over 430 of them, and I still keep finding them, and I've written a book about them. The book documents all 430, but also it's got a lot of pictures of more interesting, colorful milestones. Now, I've been trying to sell this book for $30, and there's not a big market for books on milestones. Anyway, surprise, surprise. Anyway, today, I'll knock off 20%. This is the Purple Tiger discount. And if you're interested in having one to take home with you, $24 will get you one. Thank you. Questions? Do we have time for questions? I'll be here to answer. Yes.
Are there any milestones close to Cortland that you found?
The closest one is probably the one down in Unadilla, which isn't all that close. Now, how I find out about them is just word of mouth and driving along and seeing one, and then of course I see one, then I'm all set because I go a mile and 2 miles from there.
Oh.
But if anybody finds one, I would love to be told.
I think Delaware County has a couple, I'm trying to think,
Delaware County?
yeah, which is Unadilla's in
Right on
Oh,
the
okay,
western
that's
edge.
probably on the Catskill Turnpike then.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's somewhere near a place called Meredith, New York.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I can look in my book and see if I have those. I have them listed by county. Let me look for Delaware County.
There was
Hey,
one.
yes.
Milestone Zero in DC.
Yes.
Looking at your photograph, it appeared that there was a benchmark on top. Was that so?
Yeah, yes. I have dozens of pictures of it. I had to pick one.
Oh,
Yeah, it was, yeah, that's the exact point that they decided. It's in front of the ellipse. Yeah, the ellipse is between the milestone and the White House.
And when was that monument erected?
It was actually, they chose that location during World War II, I believe, when they were trying to transport troops across the country and they wanted to develop, so it was part of Eisenhower's interstate system. And they were gonna use that for all of it, but
There is a year, I think there is a year. There's writing on all four sides. Anything else?
I have more of a personal question. So what kind of was your process between that first milestone that piqued your interest? Like what got you to started formalizing what you're doing here?
Let's see. How did I do that, Nancy?
I wasn't part of
Well,
it.
I got help from a lot of friends. There's one guy who knows about a milestone on his jogging route. So I found that one, and then I found others. But as I left it out here, as soon as I found the first one, I've been driving around with one eye on the road and the other in the gutter.
So that first one was, like, what was that experience like, that first one? Just,
Well, milestones are, now it's always a metaphor. Half the people use the term, don't even know what a milestone is.
yeah,
But I saw this one in Wheeling, West Virginia, and actually I saw one in Lancaster County before that. And I said, boy, this looks like something historic. It looks like what they call a milestone. And I guess that's about it. But, maybe, as far as finding the turnpikes go, the little book that I brought down in Owego was written by somebody doing a thesis. Has history of all the turnpikes in the Northeast. And so I knew where the turnpikes were. In some cases I went and drove along what used to be a turnpike to see if there were milestones there. And usually there wasn't. Most of them were gone. But there's still at least 430 around. And since I wrote my book, I found 2 other books that mention milestones. One is just for New England and one is just for the National Road. I put in any turnpike or post road milestone that I could find in my book.
Sometimes too, he'll find one and he'll be looking along the road and then we can get the map out and you can kind of tell sometimes, especially on the gazetteer where it gives the landform, you can kind of tell where it might be the old road that's been bypassed by the new road. So then we go and try to get on the old road and we've sometimes found them.
way cooler than geocaching, I think.
Well, and sometimes the milestone got moved to the new road.
Yeah.
And sometimes it didn't. You had to go back and forth.
So have you, how many states have you found milestones?
New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey,
Virginia, no? West Virginia.
West Virginia, Massachusetts,
Maryland,
Did you say Kansas?
Vermont?
Ohio, Ohio, Indiana and Illinois have the national road markers.
I'm trying to think, Vermont.
Yeah, the Lincoln Highway took you out there.
Yeah, I didn't, since I limited the book to Northeast, I don't count the ones further west.
But there are milestones in the western part of the country.
I don't think so. Originally, I was going to include in my book the fact that the center of population for this country was in the Northeast at the time they were building turnpikes. And so that was where the demand was for spending money to make the roads better because it would be more traffic volume. But that's just my conclusion.
Occasionally we see historic markers like down in Virginia that make mention of a turnpike, but we haven't found any milestones. Most of those were a turnpike closer to the Civil War era, so it's a little past the era of these.
Right.
Anything else? I'll hang around, have a cookie, and answer any questions or comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.